quick shooter here on a question. Group licensing, as we've talked about it, and then also the individual licensing, we're talking about agents and endorsement deals and representation. And I think there are some that would argue that this only impacts 5% of the student athletes that participate in the NCAA every year, right? And so what my round the horn question, and Bubba, I want to start with you, is that do you believe that for the average student athlete, remember there's 500,000 of them, will they make more money through group licensing or through individual licensing deals?
The average student?
The average student athlete.
Well, the average would make more through a group license than the individual license, because there's only a handful of elite athletes that are going to have that opportunity. And so just by pure numbers, you're going to have a better deal for the majority, which is really how we've been trying to do rules at the NCAA. You know, we have 85 scholarships in football. Everyone's getting the same deal. And if you take a look at the NFL roster, I mean, I think I did this a couple of years ago, or actually some law students did. The quarterback got 8% of the total payroll. You know, we don't do that. We don't allocate it by your value to the team. We allocate it evenly, 13 in men's basketball, 15 in women's basketball. Everyone's getting the same deal. Cost of attendance, everybody's getting the same cost of attendance as all the other students. And if you're talking about a kind of a pay per play, we're overpaying the vast majority and maybe underpaying some of the others. But the whole thing has been, let's just try to create experiences and opportunities for kids to get these scholarships and play. Probably longer answer than you wanted if you're going.
But I hear that the context helps, and I'm gonna loop back to Gabe here real quick. Gabe, do you have any counter to that, or is it for the average student athlete, again, across all levels, is it more revenue in group licensing or the individual deals?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a counter. I mean, I'm a Duke alum, but it doesn't mean I have to counter everything. But I would say it depends on the sport. So I think it may be fair for football and men's basketball, where there would be a popular video game. But for the average women's softball player or golfer, where I don't think there's going to be much demand for a group license, I think the real opportunity for those athletes is on, as you know, like on social media. And I would imagine there's going to be a significant number of Olympic sport athletes who are going to be able to make some amount of money from social media, and likely more than they would from a group licensing deal, which again, I think will be non-existent for the Olympic sports.
Ty, you got a thought?
I actually kind of agree with both what Bubba and Gabe said. It's like, I think, yeah, it's going to be, I think group licensing hand down is going to allocate a lot. But I think social media will be great for everyone, but you could also make group licenses around social media as a way to kind of combine that from a business standpoint. But then also, I think this is where I hope there's some level of third-party administrator that oversees everything, even individual rights, because then you're taking it off the kids and the institution's plate and you're not using agents. But I am a believer, just from my experience in doing deals with pro athletes, is you can make people a lot of money in local markets from companies you've never heard of and players you can't name if someone is out there hustling deals. And I think that on the local side, I think there will. And I think a women's softball player, for example, might be able to make $5,000 a year just from local car dealerships or these things and that's a significant amount of money. I think it's funny too to hear media people say like, well, it's only a couple $1,000s. It's like, yeah, it's easy for us to say.
That's a lot of money.
I remember being a student athlete. I remember what I graduated with in my bank account at 22. It certainly wasn't close to that. So like,
yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with the group here. I do think it is valid to point out that whether it's a group side, obviously we're trying to prove out markets, and I think we are for the WNBPA for U.S. Women's National Soccer Team. So I do think there's a little bit more value there than I think some think there are, especially on the group side. And again, they're not video games like Gabe said. They're not even, but some trading cards there and apparel, obviously, with some specialized companies that are driving women's values, I think will be some interesting markets. But I do think the one thing to point out around some of the non-revenue or I guess nonprofit, some of the teams, if we think about women's, might be the time where they have their highest earning power, right? And that, not even just on the women's side, but some of the men's sports as well. this might be the time when they're in college at like lacrosse, for example. This is at the height of a lacrosse player is when they're playing for John Hopkins or they're playing for some of these big lacrosse teams. That's where their ability to monetize their likeness might be at the height. So whether it's on the group side, whether it's on the individual side, I think I agree with everybody saying the group is the easiest and safest way to go. But the nice thing is I think most of this is all incremental to each other too. So it's not an either or.
Yeah, it's like yes and I guess so. My personal opinion on this is that or Eric, as you mentioned, the individual athlete in the typically non-ticketed or non-revenue sports, the softball player at a Division III, Division II school, the only way that individual receives a group licensing dollar is if every student athlete at every level is a part of the pie, right? Because who is going to license the Division III softball group? Who? And like that's the truth of it. And so that softball player is not going to necessarily get a cut, and it's going to actually put a lot of emphasis on a lot of customers, Eric, that you and I share and partners that we work with, and I know Ty, you as well, is that when NBA 2K put the WNBA players in the game, God, that helps. When FIFA put the women's soccer players in the game, that means so much, but it's going to put like those endemic brands that are sitting here saying that we support college athletics. We're going to really find out in the next 5 years who supports college athletics, especially if group licensing becomes a thing, right? Because somebody's going to have to purchase those rights and turn them into value. And also it's going to put a lot of pressure on the fans to actually support products that never were in market before and doing it in a way so they can actually provide revenue directly to the players, which is going to come back to another challenging point here in a second. But thoughts on this? This is my stance on, and it puts a lot of pressure on the market. So I believe that the average student athlete, my little brother plays football at Columbia, and I don't know how often Ivy League schools are going to get part of a group licensing deal, but I know he could charge $50 a pop and have 25 kids show up at this local high school and host a camp. And I think that's more money than he would ever make on a percentage split on a group licensing deal.
Yeah. The only comment I would make on here is I think we're going to have to be creative in the way we group the athletes, right? And again, if we're in this scenario, I don't think a one size fits all is probably going to be the best way to go. I can't tell you that I have an answer